Welcome to today's Reach. We're so glad to have you guys with us today. And if you miss it live, you'll be able to watch it recorded. We're going to have it both on Facebook as well as on our YouTube channel. So you'll be able to keep an eye on that. So we're really excited today to have Dr. Jim Ball with us. I've known Jim for quite a while now through the Autism Society of America. He had been the previous board chair to the Autism Society of America. He has decades in autism research. He has been an expert witness for autism. He's a certified behavior analyst. He has done early intervention, employment. I mean, pretty much you name it when it comes to autism. So we're really pleased to have him with us today to talk about behaviors. And as you guys know, especially for you guys who have kids who tend to have some really significant behavioral challenges in the state of Florida, because of the Parkland shooting and the safety laws that we're faced with now with threat assessment and just everything, so many of our kids are ending up wrapped up in a new system and, the law enforcement system that they may not have been part of before. But a lot of our kids, when considerable behavioral challenges that are happening in school, the students are entering this threat assessment process, which tends to then wrap them up into Baker Act, so hospitalization, residential, and law enforcement. And so we want you guys to understand some of the skills that you need, both at home and then in working with your schools, to help your kids deal with and live through and hopefully prosper after dealing with some of the behavioral challenges that we have. So Jim, we want to thank you for coming on today and for being so gracious with your time. All right, so what we want to start with today is what are some of the behavioral challenges that are found in children with autism? Because we know we have some parents with just, some sensory type of behaviors, but just how significant can some of those behavioral challenges get?
It's their ability to learn. For most of our kids, if you look at the research, they have average IQ or above. And when you look at those individuals, what really keeps them out of the gen ed setting or making progress are the either self-stimulatory behaviors, the aggression, the self-injurious behaviors, and even some of their social behaviors because they can't maintain themselves in the environment that they need to learn, which is the gen ed setting.
Yeah. What are some of because I know that we hear a lot these days about aggressive behavior and violent behavior. So what are the differences? And if a school comes to a parent and says, oh, your child's being violent, how can they respond to that?
Well, again, it's not, the actual behavior might be violent because we hurt something or hit somebody, but it's not done for that function. And they really need to talk with the powers to be at the district and say, okay, so what is the function and what can we teach our child to get the same function met? And it's all about their ability to communicate their needs and wants in a more effective way.
Is there a difference between temper tantrums and like oppositional behavior or, something that's more significant? Like, how does a parent tell, is this just a normal temper tantrum, or is this something that I really should address with my school or with a professional through maybe ABA, or, how can they tell when it becomes to that level where they need to seek outside assistance?
Yeah, I think for the family, I think it's more about looking at, why they're doing it and how can I help them to let me know their needs and wants more effectively. So going from a communication function always first. And then from there, if the behavior escalates to the point where they're putting themselves or anybody in the family, including, property in danger, then they need to, reach out to find out is there other issues going on, or is the child, not able to really fully communicate what they want, or are they having a meltdown? Because meltdowns are very different than tantrums. Tantrums have a specific function, and the kid is doing it either to gain something or to escape something. But the actual meltdowns are really not in the individual's control all the time. So they may start perseverating, they're going over something in their head over and over and over again, or articulating it, and then they can't get that need or want met, and then all of a sudden that meltdown occurs, and it almost has to run its course. You can't get through it because the individual is so wrapped up in it that they can't even themselves to bring themselves to be more calm.
When a parent or a teacher begins to really look at a behavior, so they're going to start examining it, they want to look for the function. What is the first thing that you think that they should do when they start entering into that process?
There are some assessments out there. There's something called the FAST, which is from Brian Iwata out of the University of Florida. And then there's also something called the Motivation Assessment Scale, which is also out of Florida, because Mark Durant did it. I think it was in Albany, New York, but Mark Durant is in Florida now. So those are two paper pencil things that families and also staff will look at. But for me, it's looking at the environment and putting the kid in different situations to see how they react. So if you ignore them and they're doing something, if they start to escalate behavior, that might be attention seeking. If you produce or give them some work, and they only have the behavior every time you give them work, that might be escaping the work. Or anything you go to a different environment, every time you're going to that environment, you see the behavior, then it's escaped from that environment. So there are ways in schools to put the kids in situations to tease out whether it's, attention seeking, whether it's escape, and also whether it's self-regulatory. Tougher kids are the kids that do it for everything. So they learn to use that behavior to escape, to gain attention, and then also to, have pleasure from it in some kind of self-stimulatory.
Behavior plans are used for a variety of reasons, but can they be used for anxiety or social skill development?
Absolutely. And most of the time, especially for the anxiety piece, it's really about, incorporating movement breaks into the child's day, giving them some practice relaxation techniques, and those are easily incorporated into that behavior plan. So, there's so many different ways to be able to do that for the anxiety. And then for, kids in social skills, it's really around like social narratives, or putting them in situations repetitively so that they get used to using the appropriate skill. So, we're not just, telling them what to do, we're also showing them what to do in the appropriate social, interaction. Because I think the one thing we forget about social skills with these kids is we don't put them in enough repetition to get them so used to it that it becomes second nature. We just sort of tell them, and then we expect them to use it, down the road. And if it was that easy, we would be having this conversation right now.
A lot of kids, well, not a lot, but a decent amount of kids, adults on the spectrum struggle with self-injurious behavior. Are there any certain techniques or things that people need to remember or think really carefully about when they start addressing those self-injury? And can you explain even a little bit to people who don't know what we're talking about, what self-injurious behavior might be?
Okay. Well, first, self-injurious behavior is probably one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult to work with, because these individuals are hitting themselves. They might ball their fist and hit themselves in the head. They might bite body parts of their own, and they're, a lot of times they're self-mutilating. And it's because of frustration, it's because of anxiety, it's because of, gaining attention or, again, escape. So they use it for a variety of different reasons. And then sometimes, I've worked with enough kids in my career where down the road it becomes habit. So you'll have a kid who might have bit their hand for years for one reason, and then you see their hand in their mouth, and they're not biting it, but they're so used to doing it, so it becomes almost habit. But to me, the most important thing, especially for families, is to have some type of crisis plan. And it's not about a teachable moment, and it's not about trying to shape behavior. It's more about trying to keep the individual and everybody in the environment safe. A lot of times with these kids, it's just, interrupting, and then moving in so that you can block them from actually hitting themselves. And then down the road, an hour or two later, having the conversation or showing a more appropriate way to do it, but not trying to teach it in the moment.
Is there a way to, is it any difference, I guess, to your pathway to determining the function of behavior in self-injury versus off-task, oppositional type of behavior?
Well, I think it's the same process. I do, and you're going to go about it the same way, but because of the severity of the behavior, you don't have the time element. So you're going to sort of be doing it's almost like building the plane while it's flying. you have to sort of, make adjustments as you go along, because again, it's just so unethical to have a kid either, hitting themselves in the head or biting themselves continuously without at least putting something in place.
Yeah. I'm sure that because I think Florida is kind of all over the news when it comes to behavior these days, and not in a great way. We have drills, constant drills happening in our schools. Code red, you name the color, we have the color. We have a code for everything. And so a lot of kids on the spectrum, that increases their anxiety, because it's like, it's interrupting their learning process. So for kids who are getting anxious and then as a result of their anxiety start exhibiting behaviors, are there any calming techniques that you think can be used? Because we are faced with drills, they're not going to go away. So do you have any ideas for some calming strategies that teachers might be able to implement in the classroom that would help them through that?
Right. Yes, and there's several. And the most important thing, I think, is that you have a social narrative that describes things as drills, and then also things that might be live. So that, and you're being very concrete about it. These are the certain things. When we have a drill, these are the things we need to do. Because again, I think, the more able the child, the more we think that they're processing the information, and they might not be. And once the anxiety goes up, it's only the anxiety that they're dealing with. They're not dealing with anything else that's going on around them. So we need to give them real clear-cut guidelines as to, when this occurs, we're going to do A, B, and C. And this is going to happen every single time. And then you have to do it through repetition. So you've got to get the child used to doing it. It was interesting, after the CARD conference last year that I presented at, I was invited back, and I actually had all the special ed teachers in the Tampa school district. I forget the name of the county there, because you're a county-wide school district. But I had all these special ed teachers in the entire county. And the first 45 minutes was an active shooter presentation by one of the sheriffs that actually did some of the investigation at Parkland. And I found it just fascinating to listen to everything. And it was so poignant in the data that, the classrooms that were locked down were the safest. And actually talked in the beginning of my speech in how to teach that, because the best way to teach that to our individuals, especially those in a self-contained classroom, is through video modeling. And once you show the individual what they need to do, they can see it. You showed them, and you have like a line, of tape on the floor, and they know where to go in the classroom. I've seen it very, very effective in a lot of places that I work in, where we do it every single day. If not twice a day, until the individuals in the classroom are so used to doing it that as soon as they hear it, there's no anxiety, there's no nothing. They just know that, okay, this is what we're supposed to do, and they just go and do it. So I know that's a little bit tougher for the kids that are in the gen ed settings. That's why I would use the social narrative. But we could also practice relaxation techniques. We can give them opportunities for movement breaks when those occur, and just get them used to doing it through repetition, because the repetition, again, is going to be the biggest key to their success and being able to use the skill.
Last year at the CARD conference, Peter Vermillion was there and did a presentation on predictions and predictability, and how he has a theory that people with autism have a really hard time making prediction. And that would kind of go to what we're talking about now, because there's no way. Is it real? Is it not real? What do I do? Do you have any opinion about that part of it, the predictability and sort of a hiccup maybe within people with autism?
Yeah, a lot. I think a lot of our kids, I don't know if it's predictability as much as they come up with really bizarre, irrational fears around things. And those fears are based on reality, because they've seen it on TV or they've seen what happened. So they know the reality of certain situations and what the potential could be. But they take that, like they do with everything, in my opinion, to the nth degree, where it's, okay, now that's going to occur every single time. It's almost like if you've seen Rain Man, his one, real big meltdown was over, getting on an airplane, because there was crashes, and he talked about crashes. And, if you really look at the statistics, you have better shot of getting hit by a car than you do going down in an airplane. But he took that and he took it to the nth degree, and that was the way it was going to be in his reality. So it's really helping them through other techniques like video modeling, like repetition, that, it's not going to happen every single time. And the dire piece is not going to happen every single time, because we've done it 10 times now, and that didn't happen.
For those who are listening who don't know, they've never heard the words video modeling before, can you kind of summarize what you mean by that?
It's teaching a skill to an individual, especially those on the spectrum, because I found it extremely effective with most of the individuals that I work with. And it would be, like showing them how to drink out of a cup as opposed to a sippy cup. So we're moving a kid from a sippy cup to a cup and they're just refusing. Then we take the lid off. We show there's no magic to it. You know how our kids get a little compulsive about things and they're so used to it, they do it their way and they get rigid about it. We can show them that this is a different way to do it. And once they've watched it a few times, then they can predict. And that's where that, interesting part of the predictability comes in. It's because you watch the video and it's never going to change. It's going to look exactly the same every single time. So your anxiety goes down. So if your anxiety goes down, then you can predict what's going to happen next in that video every single time, which means that I'm not going to die if I drink out of a cup as opposed to a sippy cup. It's not going to hurt me to do that. My favorite one is I do a ton with kids who refuse to get their hair cut. And it sort of makes sense to me because if you think about it, your hair grows, right? So, and the logic is that if it's growing and somebody cuts it, it might hurt. And I get that, but you can tell them all you want that it's not going to hurt. But probably one time their hair was pulled or they got, hit with the electric razor or something. And they're going to do is think about that. But if you show them happy haircut videos, because you can get unhappy haircut videos if you go online, but if you get happy haircut videos, it happens to me at least 5 or 6 times a year where I've done this with families, and they come back to me when I come back to the district, and they're like, we did that, Jim, and it worked perfectly. Because again, you know what? It's not that.
I lost us for a minute. Oh, technology. So a lot of times kids with all sorts of disabilities have a hard time, and you see some behaviorals in the classroom when the schoolwork, the academics are confusing. They're not sure what to do. And so we know we have accommodations and modifications. So can you describe for those both teachers and parents who don't know the difference, what the difference is between those two?
Well, again, I think they're the same to me because you're going to make modifications, and you're also going to have accommodations for the individual. But the most basic ones are just chunking the work so that because a lot of our individuals will do the work and they do it right, but then you bore them because you're making them do too many through the repetition, or the repetition is a paper to pencil task, and for some reason, even so, though most of the kids I work with that are in gen ed have beautiful handwriting, they don't like to write. So there's alternative ways of doing it via the iPad with a stylist, or there's ways of modifying the work so there's not as much. And sometimes I'll even get teachers that they'll hand my kid the packet, and one of their accommodations is to chunk the work, which means get rid of some of it. And the teacher would have put X's through some of the things in the packet, but what is that kid hyper focusing on? The actual packet. So it's like, you can tell them all you want that. Oh, no, you're not going to have to do it all. All they see is the packet, and that's all they're going to hold on to. So it's even like to the point where giving them things where you even, cut, half of it off and just give them the ones you want them to do, and don't do the cross out and don't do those things, so that the individual, the kid knows, okay, I don't have to do as many. And then there needs to be an individual reinforcement system for every kid also. So when they do the work, what are they going to earn for it? And we know that, I hate to say it, and you probably know it yourself, and it can happen over time, but initially our kids don't find learning inherently reinforcing. They don't sit there and go 1 and 1 is 2. Woo! I love this math stuff. Give me another one. They're like 1 and 1 is 2. I told you that already. Now leave me alone. So, and I so get that. And, we need to, whatever their motivator is we need to get them motivated to do it. Because if not, it's not going to happen.
Do you have any, just since we're talking about motivators, do you happen to know of any tool or something that parents could use to kind of probe to figure out what are you reinforced by? What motivates you? How can a parent or a teacher begin to find that needle in a haystack?
Yeah, there's the best way is it's called a forced reinforcer assessment, and a quick operational definition of it would be, you can web search it, but you ask everybody in the kid's life, whoever it is, bus aide, bus driver, parents, grandparents, significant others, teachers, past teachers, the maintenance guy if they know him. What do you think motivates this kid? And put them all in a box and make a list. And then when you're working with the kid, you bring both out and you show them both, and you say, what do you want to work for? And every kid can make a choice regardless of where they are on the spectrum. And if they reach for one, you do a little work, you give it to them. If they continue to keep good behavior, then you put a plus next to that one. If they don't, you put a minus, and then you just add up the pluses and the minuses, and that should give you a really good idea of what's motivating. And I'm a big fan of the kid working for a break. Unless I definitely know what that to die for motivator is, I like them to work for a break, and then on the back of their system is all of their choices. And then give them a choice at that time, so that they're in control of their own, motivator. Because a lot of times I work with kids where they pick something initially, and then 30 minutes in, they've earned their break and they still have a meltdown. And I'm like, well, you just got what you wanted, but at that time, 30 minutes later, they don't want that anymore, and they can't articulate it to you. So you're just thinking, okay, you just got what you wanted. I don't understand this. When it was easily, reversed by just having them earn the break and then choosing what they want to do after that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm often at schools where it's like everybody sits there at a loss. Like, what can we give to this child that will motivate them? So that was great information. So now the big question is, once you have a behavior plan in the school, how do you then implement that, bring some of those strategies into the home and into the community so that it's a wraparound?
Okay. And we always need to keep in mind, though, because, we do talk about consistency across environments, but home is very different than school. And people need to respect that and know that, the child doesn't have to ask to go to the bathroom at home. They just go. The child doesn't ask to go in the refrigerator to get something. They just go. And the demand situations are very, very different. So when parents say, well, we don't see that at home, I so get that, because there's not a lot of demand situations, so you're not going to see the same. Or at school they may see something that the family doesn't see. So I think in the grand scheme of things, the programs are not always going to be exactly the same. But you should use whatever, especially if it's more aggressive or self-injurious behavior, whatever the crisis plan is. And I always tell for families is to find a safe place in the house, normally not the kid's room, and not where you can shut them, with a door, but it's in a more open environment, and get as many soft things as you can, beanbag chairs, mats, big pillows, weighted stuff, and leave it in that area. And when the child starts to melt down, you send them to that area. And if you do it repetitiously enough, when the child starts to do that, over time, the child will start to time themselves out. And for the kids, when they get bigger, it would be just redirecting them into that area so that they stay safe, you stay safe, and base it all on, their overall behavior. So it's based on a definition. Because I think a lot of times in crisis, when you look at kids, it depends on, a variety of variables, but they're not defined variables. They're usually the adult's, tolerance level at that time. And then the child figures it out, and then they'll challenge it. So you may see even more behavior just by the child challenging, what's going to happen during this crisis when there's 5 adults in this room all of a sudden, and I'm getting all this attention and all these things are happening. How do I cut it off way before we get to that point? Because once it hits that, what I call the point of no return, sometimes you're just going to have to, ride the behavior out until the child can bring themselves back down, from their stress level, where you can then do some kind of teachable moment.
And I find that that's happening more and more often, especially for kids that are in gen ed settings. It's like everybody's in the room, everybody comes in to help, but yet what are they really helping?
Yeah, and I've always written in minor, sometimes it's almost laughable. The staff starts laughing at me because I have the principal's going to come in at this time. Once the principal's there, these 2 people are going to leave the room. And whoever the crisis team is in the building, or whoever's, crisis prevention institute trained, or, so everybody's got a role. And then even to the degree where they laugh is when I say, okay, and if this person's absent, who's taking their place?
Right.
And they're like, well, we have to be that specific. I'm like, yeah, because that kid's going to figure it out. So we need to stay extremely specific and base it on a definition of behavior that we're pretty, confident that 90% of the time, if this kid, does this behavior, he's going to melt down. This way we can help him or her, get to the point where they can be able to tell us, communicatively how, to escape or to get away or to take a walk or to have a movement break. But in the interim, we need to do it for him and teach him that that's the appropriate way to do it, not to have the actual meltdown.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people get so bogged down in trying to get through the moment and not looking at the outcome. We want them to grow up to be successful in society, but yet they're so busy trying to get the kid through the day that they inadvertently end up reinforcing the negative behavior.
Yeah, and it all comes down to, again, and I'm going to date myself on this one, but if you remember the old Midas muffler commercial, pay me now or pay me later, it's all about being proactive. So if you're proactive and you're teaching this individual social skills and different ways communicatively to get their needs and wants met, and you do that through repetition and show them, what they need to do, I've had great success with individuals being able to pull that off on their own and then figuring out how to integrate it into their own lives, because I've had the great fortune in my career, 35 years of seeing kids at 3 and now they're in their 30s, and I've seen those kinds of successes with a lot of the individuals when we were able to do that, through the repetition and giving them those opportunities, because it was wonderful. 2 weekends ago, a young man I worked with, maybe 20 years ago, got married. So, and it was, and he has done so well. And they're just, it was just a marvelous day. And it was one of those, where, as I get older, I'm like, there's not many firsts in your life anymore, because you've already done those. But this was one that was just really exciting. And it was because of him. It was him and his family that really, worked really hard. And he's just so remarkable. And it was just wonderful to see. So, and there are those success stories that are out there.
So as a parent, and this is the last question. So as a parent is trying to decide, okay, we got to get going on this. Are there any key people that you think would be really great to have on that team to start making behavioral decisions about where do we go next?
Yeah, to me, and the key member obviously is the speech and language pathologist, because every kid does behavior for the number one function of communication. They're communicating something. So how can we teach them an alternative way to do that? And then the next one, obviously because of my background, I'm going to tell you it should be a behaviorist or a board certified behavior analyst on that team that can really look beyond what's going on in the moment and really project out, the things that we need to do in order to make the kids successful. Because, in my career, when I see kids, I don't have the luxury of looking at that 4-year-old as a 4-year-old. I will at times, but I have to look at that 4-year-old as a 21-year-old adult. And where can I get that individual and what do they need in order to be successful? And over time, if you map it out, and you have goals and strategies, it's so much easier. But so many different places are so reactive that, like you were saying earlier, you're just responding to what's going on in the moment. And that moment might never happen again. You may never see the same set of variables again, and you haven't taught anything. So what do you look at long term in order to make that kid successful? But those are the two people that I look towards. And then, always the classroom teachers, because especially the gen ed teachers, I wish I had more opportunities to work with them than I actually do the special ed teachers. Because again, and to no fault of their own, this kid comes into their classroom and even if they've had one before, this one's not going to be like the last one because they're so very different. And they're not given enough, information and training to know that, because there's a list of like 10 basic strategies that they should always have in place for this kid, a visual schedule, a reinforcement system, a functional communication system, just basic things, how to prompt them, what kind of prompts to use, and if they have that, they're going to do so much better with this kid. And to me, it's more about investing that time, especially for because the kids that I have the most problem with, aren't the kids that are in the more traditional, self-contained classrooms. It's the ones that are out in the gen ed setting that need to be in the gen ed setting. But because of their behaviors, we can't maintain them. And if we can't maintain them, then they end up in those classrooms and they don't get the rigor of the gen ed curriculum because those teachers can't teach it. And that's, again, where, I've done some video modeling where if the kid's doing it for escape in the gen ed setting, I have the kid in the special ed setting and we Skype into the classroom so he doesn't or she doesn't get out of the rigor of the work, and then they do the work back in the special ed setting, and then we re-immerse them back in as they figure out, oh, okay, wait, I'm going to have to do the work regardless, so I might as well be over there. And it's their aha moment, not mine.
Yeah, that's great because, so often we hear it's either this or it's that. There's no interplay between the two.
Now, and again, and I'm going to give, a lot of kudos to, even the districts, because what I try to do is just think, and I always use the word blend. I'm like, okay, this isn't an if or that. It's not if he should be in the gen ed setting or if he should be in the special ed setting. Let's blend a program that's going to be successful for everybody. His peers and him, his teachers and him or her, do it as a group so that, we can always pull back if we have to, but it gives everybody the opportunity to, settle down, and then let's re-immerse and get the kid back in where they need to be, but instead of just keeping them in an all or nothing kind of scenario. And that's, like you said, I think that's the one place that, especially for the school districts, they tend to do that. But the ones I work in, even some of the more rigid ones that I've worked in over the years, when we start to talk about blending programs, normally they're amenable to it. They're willing to work on it, as long as we can show success.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jim, for being with us today.
Well, thank you.
I'm gonna, Jim has written a few books. So what I'm gonna do is on the page, on the Facebook page, I'm gonna put the links so that you guys could check out the books, especially the ones on behavior, which is gonna go right along with what he shared with us today. And then we'll also, like I said, put this up on our YouTube channel so you guys will be able to check it out there. And so the links, I'll put the link so that you'll just click on it and it will take you right to the book and you'll be able to read the reviews of the books. But again, Jim, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. We appreciate your time and certainly your dedication to the autism community is just wonderful. All right.
Thank you. And I always love Florida. So.
Well, you can come down and help fix our system anytime you want.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.